and starting a new recording, which will be on Cemil Meriç. Okay, now Cemil Meriç, the article on Cemil Meriç is written by a friend of mine with whom we did a study on religion and society, the relationship between religion and society in Turkey, and we published the book as Türkiye'de dindarlık, you might know, iletişim yayınları. Now, Recep Şentürk is the second researcher there. There are two other researchers. Now, Recep Şentürk wrote this article again in Çağatay Özdemir's Türkiye'de Sosyoloji, İsimler, Eserler. Okay, now, I advise you, if you find that book, to read that article. Cemil Meriç is born in Reyhaniye. Okay, now where? In Hatay. When? In 1916. So actually, he was born again outside of Turkish Republican boundaries, like Kemal Karpat'a born in Romania. He was born in Hatay. Yes, it was between Syria and between Turkey. It was a separate province, but it was it had its own muhtariyet. It joined with a referendum. It joined Turkish Republic in 1939. So from 1916, from his birth to joining, he is a member of that entity, that province. Now, so he had his high school education there, and he conflicted with his teachers on nationalism. So, for example, he wasn't able to complete his lycée education there, this Antakya Sultanisi. So he came to Istanbul and graduated from Istanbul Pertevniyal High School. But his early education in Hatay provided him with a second language. He knew not only Ottoman and Turkish, but also French. He learned French there because French was also dominant in Syria at that time. So there was influences into Hatay. So he learned French well, actually. As you will see, he has many translations from French into Turkish. Okay, and then after graduating from Pertevniyal and becoming a teacher, he became starting from 1938, he became a school teacher in the villages. And in 1940, he joined Foreign Languages, School of Foreign Languages of Istanbul University, the French section, French language section of School of Foreign Languages of Istanbul University. No, let me see. He joined there in 1946, but in 1940, he's accepted into that school again into the French section of it, and graduated there as a university graduate. And in the meantime, in 1943, he translated Balzac's novel *The Girl with Golden Eye*, and then he joined the School of Foreign Languages as an instructor. From 1946 to 1974, he was a faculty member and instructor there. After retiring, he continued writing his books, and actually he became famous with those books. But his first book, actually, is written when he was still the member of this language school, Hint Edebiyatı, literature, Indian literature. It was published in 1964. So, as we will see in a minute, when he talks, he himself talks about his philosophical, ideological phases. He talked about his philosophical, ideological phases. He says that he was interested in Indian philosophy in his fifth period, between 1960 and 64. And at the end of that period, he published this book. So for 5 years, he was an Indianist, let's say. But let's go back. He qualifies his 1917 to 1925, that period that he was in Hatay province, and then he came to Istanbul, Perternial. He was strictly Muslim. Strictly Muslim. That's how he qualified himself. From 1925 to 36, he was chauvinist nationalist. He was so nationalist that he argued with his teachers, and he was thrown out of school. Now that's from 1925 to 36. From 1936 to 38 years, he was a socialist Marxist. He was a socialist Marxist. From 1938 to 1960, okay, for how many years? More than 20 years. There's an incubation. He's finding his way, his approach, incubation. And then there's an Indianist period. And then from 1964 until his death, 1987, he is an Ottomanist, indigenist, and a nationalist. If I say these, indigenous, yerlici, yerlicilik, yerelcilik. Although they are different, yerlicilik and yerelcilik are two different, but still close to each other, and nationalist. But these are a series of transformations, and finally, after he found himself, let's say, he found himself in his, through his incubation, and continued into Indian philosophy period. But from 1964 onwards, he published that Indian literature book, and he became clear, it seems, in his approach, and he wrote these books. Now, in 1967, he wrote a book on Saint-Simon as first sociologist and first socialist, and that was the title of the book. That's interesting. Although this is, his socialistic period was early, but still, in this period, he wanted to write a book on a utopian socialist, and the founder of sociology, one of the founders of sociology, although we know as Auguste Comte, as you know, is a student of Saint-Simon. Okay, and then in 1976, Bir Dünyanın Eşiğinde. Okay, now he became here not only an Ottomanist, but an Eastern approach. In Ottoman times and in Turkish Republican times, especially in conservative intelligentsia, among conservative intelligentsia, this East-West dichotomy, East-West opposition, and also secularism, religion opposition, tradition, modernity, these oppositions are subsumed under East-West. So Cemil Meriç adopted an Eastern approach but an Eastern approach, knowing the West, knowing the French very well, and reading French literature, philosophy from the first language, you know, and yet he opted for an Ottomanist, an Easternist, a Middle Eastern point of view. For example, Kemal Karpat is not emphasizing this East-West dichotomy very much. He is not an Easternist. He's a historian, sociologist, historical sociologist, pointing out the importance of Ottoman Islamic traditions in the last period of Ottoman Empire and in the Republic, continuities. But Cemil Meriç is not like Kemal Karpat. You know, he's not writing an English book for English reading audience, the world audience, but Turkish books for Turkish people. But as we will see some articles on him, but ring to some universalist approach, at least universalist in the sense of being similar, for example, to an Iranian intelligent Iranian writer, philosopher, and a Japanese philosopher writer. Now, Cemil Meriç and these two, one Iranian and one Japanese, they have parallel approaches. Now, what are they named? Takushi Yoshimi from Japan and Jalal al-Ahmad from Iran. Now, there is one article which pairs him with, okay, there's one article which compares him with both of them. We will come to that article in a few minutes. Serdar Poyraz's article that's published in Comparative Studies of South Asia, Africa, and Middle East by Duke University, middle of 1960s onward. He is a fully formed intellectual. He's a fully formed intellectual, and he developed a point of view that many people in Turkey adopt as an approach in their analyses, in their criticisms of early Republican period and Committee of Union and Progress period. They use his approach in criticizing secularist approaches and secularist elite. So, as a sociologist of Turkish sociology, development of sociology in Turkey, we have to take an account of him. So, as I was saying, light comes from east. Işık doğudan gelir. In 1984, this is very important. East adopting an east approach towards the west. And then the next one is just complementing that, from kültürden irfana, from culture to a philosophical understanding, a wisdom, a kind of wisdom rooted in Islam and in indigenous culture. 1974 and then 1985 publication Bir Ülke, from when you do a Google search, you know, people who read Cemil Meriç give a great importance to that. And the others, İmran'dan Uygarlığa, the civilization rooted in this country, in this culture, that kind of a civilization. And then he has günlükler, journals, 92, 94. Anyway, you will see that, and then he has conferences. His conferences on sociology is also published as sociological notes and conferences after he died. Actually, 5-6 years after he died. Okay, now let me come back to the article of Serdar Poyraz, which I already mentioned. As I said, this is thinking about this. The title of the article is Thinking About Turkish Modernization. Cemil Meriç on Turkish Language, Culture, and Intellectuals. Okay. Now, Serdar Poyraz, in this article, tries to evaluate reading material written on him and his own books. This is a research by Serdar Poyraz on Cemil Meriç's approach. What kind of an approach? Now, he says that Cemil Meriç is one of the sociologists in Turkey who questions the accuracy of official dogma, the official dogma of not present period, but official dogma of maybe 60s, of 70s, maybe 80s, you know, the secularist, nationalist history of Turkish Republic, the history that is being taught in high schools or in universities, and Turkish, the course on Turkish Revolution, Turkish reforms, two-semester course. He calls that the official dogma of Turkish modernization, from Ottoman to Republic, early Republic, to the present. It is actually early Republic mostly, as you know. The official dogma is based on the early Republican period from 1923 to 1946 or 1950. The later period is usually not included in that narrative. Okay, now here I underlined these two paragraphs, and I will read that, and maybe I will stop with that. Now, Poyraz says the official dogma's narrative of linear progress, when he say this narrative on the official dogma's narrative progress, narrative of linear progress, which formed the backbone of main arguments of diverse writers on Turkish modernity, such as Bernard Lewis, Niyazi Berkes, explicitly depends on a set of dichotomies. Which dichotomies? Tradition, modernity, religion, science, empire, republic, and implicitly favors the dichotomies second terms. So what Raz is thinking is that these official, similar to official dogma authors, take the side of second terms, that is modernity, science, and republic, over tradition, religion, and empire. While the first terms stand for arbitrariness with respect to political government, lack of reason in societal affairs, according to accepted wisdom, the official dogma says that the first terms represent arbitrariness, lack of reason, etc. Whereas second terms represent order in politics and reason in society. Remember, akıl ve iman, Kemal Karpat'a says, taking the side of akıl, reason, science, and ignoring the side of iman. Okay, so similarly, Poyraz is saying that Meriç is debunks this simplistic account and argues that modernization in Turkey is a complex process during which some essential cultural ingredients of society, the language and shared norms of interpersonal behavior, language and shared norms of interpersonal behavior are badly damaged. Yeah, Poyraz is saying that this secular reforms damaged interpersonal behavior by alienating it from its traditional religious context. Now, Poyraz continues, Turkish modernization in Meriç is not a process of linear progress, but a process containing serious amounts of alienation. Alienation of serious amounts of alienation of where here alienation of the political elite and of intellectuals from the common people. And this is conservative circles in Turkey accuses of political elite and intellectuals being alienated from common people. From now they use society, or actually they were using this term. Secular state is separated from society, whereas state and society should be together, etc. You know, they are using actually Meriç's arguments. You know, those politicians are using Cemil Meriç's arguments. And Meriç is continuing, Turkish modernization and secular type of modernization led to displacement of identities. The casualties, the bad results, casualty here, accidents, what happened as a result of this displacement of identities, as a result of this type of modernization, what are lost? Casualty is those things that are lost. What are lost? They include the lost elements, casualties include not only ethnic and religious minorities, but also those societal groups that formerly represented the mainstream in several of empire's institutions. Mainstream in empire's institutions. What are they? Religious orders and tarikats. Now, as you know, religious orders, tarikats, are closed, and madrasas are closed by the Republic. Now, according to Poyraz, Cemil Meriç thinks that closing of tarikats and madrasas and some other institutions of the empire damaged identities, displaced, caused such displacement of identities that that gave rise to cultural crisis, or cultural Kampf, cultural struggles, polarization, cultural and political polarization, ideological polarization is continuing. So Poyraz is explaining, Serdar Poyraz is explaining present polarization, cultural struggles to this Cemil Meriç's criticism of one type of modernization that led to displacements, to alienation of intellectuals and society, alienation of state and society. And Poyraz continues and says, Cemil Meriç symbolizes an intellectual trend in Turkey whose ideas are similar to those of Takushi Yashimi in Japan and Jalal al-Ahmad in Iran, in that they question predominant Eurocentric notions of modernization and enlightenment. So here, Eurocentric notions of modernization and enlightenment. So, Turkish modernization, according to Poyraz, is Eurocentric, being secular, or secularization understanding of modernization that is carried out by elites, by the secular elites, are Eurocentric, according to Poyraz. And he continues. I will not continue. I advise you to read the rest of this article. But when I saw this Takushi Yoshime, I searched in the internet, and I found an article on Takushi Yoshime's 1960 Asia as a Method lecture. In 1960, Takushi Yoshime gave a lecture titled Asia as a Method. Now, Kuan Hsing Chen is saying that this lecture actually is a method of analysis of an inter-Asia relationships, an Asian Eastern approach, an Eastern approach analysis, rather than a Euro-centered approach, an Asia-centered approach versus Euro-centered approach. So Kuan Hsing Chen, whom actually Poyraz, no, not Kuan Hsing Chen, but Takushi Yoshime, whom Poyraz quotes. I don't know whether he uses this Kuan Hsing Chen's article, but from this depiction of this article, one can see that Takushi Yoshime and Cemil Meriç have some common approaches, understandings. And then also I found also an article on the Iranian Jalal al-Ahmad, by Anja Pistor Hatam. And the title of that article is Jalal Ahmad's 1923-1969 Reflections on Selected Periods of Iranian History. When you read this Anja Pistor Hatam's article, you also see that there are similarities between him and Cemil Meriç. There is another article that I reproduced here, Sertaç Demir's Criticisms of Western Culture in the Works of Ali Shariati, again an Iranian intellectual, and Cemil Meriç. So it's also, if you want to write something on Cemil Meriç, these are good sources. And as I said, I include a short excerpt from Ümit Meriç's speech about her father. Actually, as I said, Ümit Meriç was eyes of Cemil Meriç, because Cemil Meriç was almost blind early in his life. So many of newspapers or books were read to him by Ümit Meriç, his daughter, and many of those books are dictated by Cemil Meriç, written by Ümit Meriç. Okay, I think this much will be enough